Well, congratulations as you're approaching the end of this course. In this last session, we're going to be talking about estate planning and then just pulling together a complete integrated financial plan as an individual. So as we talk about estate planning, let's just talk about a will and what the basic purpose of a will is. Again, a will is outlines what your desires are for how your assets are going to be distributed after all your debts are paid, and who is going to be distributed to and how much, and all of those details. And the whole concept, definitionally, of estate planning is the act of planning how your wealth will be allocated on or before your death. And so a will becomes an important part of that, because it really is that legal request for how your estate should be distributed, how it should be handled. And it can also identify if you have children, or if you have somebody else, that if there is a preferred guardian who's going to get involved in that. What are the reasons for having a will? Well, it ensures that your wishes are carried out on your estate. It helps to identify what the beneficiaries, the heirs are, and these are the people that are specified in the will to receive a part of an estate. There's definitionally, there's something called a condition called intestate, which is the condition of dying without a will. And in essence, when that happens, you're putting the decisions about your estate into the hands of the state itself. And the court will appoint somebody who will make decisions, and they may not be decisions that you would have preferred to have. For example, if you have 4 children, and you wish things to be carried out where each child is handled differently with respect to what they may get, if you do not have a will, more than likely the court is just going to make the decision that there's going to be equal distribution of everything to the children. It may even order that certain things be sold so that the finances could be distributed equally. And there may be things that are sold that you wished were not sold, that you wished were kept intact and given to one specific person. So again, is you want to avoid dying without a will as much as possible. When we talk about just creating a valid will, the textbook goes through just some of the legal requirements that are out there. Let me just walk you through what are some of the kinds of wills that are out there. There is something called a simple will that is suitable for most people. It just is specifies that the entire estate is going to be distributed to a spouse. If that will doesn't exist, most states are automatically going to do that anyway if one spouse dies, and so that is not necessarily as big of a concern. But when you talk about a will, there's key components of the will itself. Guardian aspects are going to be important, and if you have a specific person you want to actually administer the will, you want to say that, who's called the executor of the estate. If you want to change your will, again, there are valid reasons for changing a will. If you move to a different state with different laws, you're going to want to look at the possibility of changing your will. Again, an attorney can tell you as to whether or not that is going to be necessary. If you marry or divorce, you're going to want to change your will. Any other major changes in your life may require changing of the will. And again, these are all the kinds of things that an attorney can get involved in telling you what you should and shouldn't do. So let's talk about estate taxes themselves. For most of us, estate taxes are not going to be anything to concern ourselves with, because you have to have an estate of over $5 million to really come into play on an estate taxes. But if you do happen to have an estate that is in excess of that amount, then there's some rather significant tax planning that you're going to want to bring into this, and you're going to want a professional to really get involved with that. There's other related taxes that are on your state. Sometimes states will also impose taxes on estates, and their limits and their amounts are going to be different. than what the federal estate taxes are. So again, this is why it's important that you always want to get involved with talking with an attorney so that you can understand exactly if you're going to be impacted at all by estates. Taxes themselves. There are also out there with respect to just retirement or estate planning. There are trusts and gifts and contributions. These may all be used to help to avoid estate taxes. A trust itself is merely a legal document in which one person transfers assets to another who then manages them for designated beneficiaries. And there's all sorts of kinds of trusts. There's living trust, which is this is a trust that happens while you're still alive. There's a revocable living trust. That's a living trust that you can still dissolve before you die. And there's also irrevocable living trust, which by its name basically says that once you've established the trust, you cannot change it. It just provides income to the grantor. And so these are all tools that could be used. There's a standard living trust, which is established for children in the family. There's all sorts of different kinds of documents out there, and depending upon what your specific requirements or desires or needs are, legal counsel can really help you make decisions on that. There's also gifts, and just to be aware that there's an individual from one person to another can make a tax-free transfer of assets and assets of up to $14,000 per year for gift. And so this can be a simple way of transferring assets from one person to another person. Be aware that those gifts, that when it comes to Medicaid coverage and things like that, that Medicaid will go back into the recent past to see if these kind of transfers have occurred for qualifications for certain kinds of expenses. So gift transference is not something that should happen in the very end stages of life. It needs to be planned out farther ahead of time. Also, there are contributions to charitable organizations which can be made out of a person's estate or potential estate that in essence could shield from estate taxes themselves. There's many other aspects of tax planning, as I mentioned before, living wills. There are power of attorneys that can be put into place, which is granting a person the power to make specific decisions for you in the event that you are incapable. And this can be important, especially if one person is starting to experience some health problems. There's for healthcare purposes, there's what's called a durable power of attorney, which is granting the rights for somebody else to make specific healthcare decisions for you. Let me just briefly mention maintaining estate plan documents, and this is actually important for whether it's for your estate or just for personal protection reasons. There's certain documents that really you want to keep together in one location. The textbook actually goes through this, but again, it's just to reiterate, there's estate planning information, your life insurance policies, retirement accounts, your important documents related to your home itself, including the mortgage information. If you own other real estate, the documents associated with that other real estate. There may be personal property type items that you want to keep, information on personal loans, your credit cards that you have out there, any businesses you own, personal legal documents, recent personal tax returns, bank account information, investment information. In essence, just think of what are the kinds of things that if all of a sudden, and I don't mean to sound morbid, you were to get hit by a car and immediately killed, that somebody coming in and trying to, in essence, take care of your affairs, how much difficulty would they have of finding that information? Or is it stuck in drawers, stuck in file cabinets, stuck under the mattress? How would they be able to sit down and start to take care of pulling together the kinds of decisions that are necessary for your estate? And also, just one thing that you want to consider is if you do not have a fireproof safe in your home, and I'm just talking about a little safe, not a big gun safe type of safe. even though that's also a good place to keep something, is maybe you want to have a fireproof box that some of these important documents are kept in. How does estate planning fit into your financial plan? Again, it's should you create a will? Uh, and if so, what exactly do you want to have in that will? Do you need to establish a trust? Do you need to be concerned about larger estates, about trying to manage your estates? Who's going to be the person who's going to carry out your wishes themselves? And identifying that and making arrangements with that person. So as we kind of wrap everything else up here, we want to talk about the last chapter, which is just the integrating the financial plans. Um, and so, as you can see here from the exhibit that is found in your chapter itself, there's all of these financial planning tools that all have impact on your cash inflows, your cash outflows, and the decisions that you make on that. So, as we really kind of look at all of these kinds of aspects, we want to understand that there's a role for budgeting where it really allows you to forecast how much money you're going to have at the end of the month so you can anticipate your cash shortages to be making liquidity decisions, and you can make decisions with respect to all of the other aspects of where you want to put your money itself. Budgeting, I mean, there's a trade-off between spending money that comes in today and allocating monies for the future. And the biggest problem with respect to budgeting, the biggest problem with respect to any kinds of plans here is just excessive spending that a person makes right now. Because financial planning really involves decisions about how much money you're going to allocate to liquidity, how much you're going to allocate to insurance, investments, retirement planning. And overspending is a common problem, especially in younger generations. We overspend on cars. We can overspend on housing. We can overspend on toys itself, and many spend and they think about saving later in life when often it is so much harder to make those kinds of decisions. As you're going through and you're making decisions for managing liquidity, you, of course, as we've talked about in the past, you want to ensure that you have enough liquid assets to cover any budget deficits that you have out there, and or potentially have out there. And we've talked about money in checking accounts, savings account, money market accounts, short-term financing, and there's a trade-off. And of course, those trade-offs is always between liquid assets, which can earn little or no interest, versus non-liquid assets, which can earn higher interest outsell. And when you go through personal financial planning, you always want to make decisions on purchases that you want to maximize using cash on those purchases as much as possible, which means that you want to maximize savings before you actually make the purchase decision itself. And there's always personal trade-offs that you have to consider with respect to rent versus mortgages, as we've talked about. There are decisions you want to make with respect to protecting your assets and income that is out there, and that's where insurance comes into place to in essence maintain the wealth that you have accumulated and protect it. And that's whether it's property insurance, auto insurance, health insurance. All of these factors come into play. And of course, we've talked a lot about managing investments itself, investment decisions to meet your own personal needs, and investment decisions that are consistent with your risk tolerance itself. And the high risk, high return versus low risk, low return trade-offs that are just part of making those kinds of decisions. And also with respect to just retirement and estate planning, is you want to ensure that you have sufficient funds, that you have sufficient capability to fulfill whatever your personal plans are. And then as we wrapped up the session just talking about just the importance of having financial documents that are protected, that are really accumulated in one place. And as you look at pulling all of these things together, you just recognize that financial planning and personal financial planning isn't a one-time event that you do in your life, that it is something that you're constantly revisiting as your financial positions change in life, as your personal goals change in life, and you always want to be going back and revising your plan to meet those goals. So this textbook becomes just an important tool for you to continually remind yourself as to what it means to have a personal financial plan. And whether you're 20 years old or you're 50 years old, going back and revisiting this is an important part of just keeping a handle on where you are in your life, and maintaining what you want to maintain for your personal lifestyle and for caring for your family. I hope you have a happy and blessed life, and thank you for listening through to these lectures.